Good morning, Sandra. Family members of the victims are expected to make a statement in court today. And coming up, we're going to talk to a man who has been through a similar experience himself.
It is sentencing day for Gardner, and Lena Lewis is downtown this morning with more on what we can expect will happen. Lena?
Good morning, Sandra. Good morning, Dan. It is expected that the family members of the victims will make a statement in court today. Obviously, a very difficult day, one of many difficult days that they will face for the rest of their lives. And with me this morning is John Dadian, who can relate to what they're going through because his father was murdered 35 years ago. And Mr. Dadian, you're also a victims' rights advocate, and you're here today to give us a little perspective on what the families might be going through at this time. And we hear some folks talking about closure, that perhaps today is the day they will get closure to all of this. But you're here to tell us that really, closure never comes.
It absolutely never comes at all. What they will do for the rest of their lives, the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, as I've had to do, is you move through life, you do the best you can, you do the things you hope your loved ones would want you to do, but absolutely no closure. They will think about this, without exaggeration, every other minute for the next 30 years.
That's basically what you've been living the last 35 years, dealing with what happened to your father every single day. Can you give us a little perspective, a little insight into perhaps what they will be feeling in the courtroom, and how in the world do you cope with something like that?
Well, what they're going to be doing today at the time of sentencing is giving a victim's impact statement, which is great. And now that is the way it's done in California. 35 years ago, that was not the law in California. And so I did not have that opportunity. So this is very good that that is being done. And that, again, it absolutely doesn't give them closure, but it does help them. It's very therapeutic that they'll be able to do this. As one of the mothers of the victim said yesterday, that because she'd been dealing with this, getting ready all week, she hadn't even written her statement. So I'm sure she started putting notes down last night. When she actually gives it, believe me, it will have a little bit of a release.
A lot of folks out there watching this story from the outside can't imagine ever being in the same room with someone who would take the life of their child. Trying to put themselves in that situation, imagining how would you control your emotions? How would you get through that moment, really, in some cases, without wanting to just attack them or to get some sort of retaliation? How do you get to that place where you can say, I can be in this room, get through this moment, and leave with dignity?
The best way I can answer that is a quote that was said by one of the families, not on the subject of just how they're dealing with it, and they said they have no choice. And that's really what the situation is. You have no choice. In my situation, again, a little different than this, I do have to go to a parole hearing every 2 years, and you are not in a courtroom setting like this, and not with the person manacled. You are sitting at a conference table about 10 feet away from the bad guy. It is very, very tough to not leap across that table. Have I thought about it? Of course I have. Have I ever done it? Of course not.
Because that's a human emotion that people would struggle with.
And again, it's without exaggeration to say that my emotions probably, now that I'm 51 years old, probably have not changed since I was 16 years old, which is how old I was at the time it happened. You really feel the exact same way. It has not changed in 35 years.
And Mr. Dadian, the reality is your life, as you've been telling us, has changed forever. You will never be the same. You think about this every single day. How do you cope with that? How do you get through your day even 35 years later?
Well, in my case, you live your life the best way that you hoped your loved one would want you to live. What this family will be going through, as I said, although they won't have to go through parole hearings, they will think about it all the time, but especially they will think about it in benchmark times. Maybe when the son, who's only 10 years old right now, Chelsea, when he graduates high school, they'll think, wish Chelsea was here. When he gets married, when he goes through other points in his life, when the family goes through points in life, that's really the toughest time. You know, I've been obviously through a lot of different things. You know, I was in the military, I graduated college, etc. You always think, gee, you know, but again, it's just a reality that you have to deal with.
It's always on your mind. Well, we are sorry for your loss, and we do appreciate your perspective as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lena.
All right, Dan and Sandra, just a little insight there from Mr. Dadian, who, as he was telling us, lost his father 35 years ago. He was murdered, giving us some perspective and some insight into what the family members might be feeling emotionally in their hearts this morning and this afternoon as they're making their way to the courtroom. Back to you guys in the studio.
And yesterday, Lena, we talked to District Attorney Bonnie Dumanis, who also will be in that courtroom today. And I asked her, what are you feeling about this? And she said it is going to be a very tense day, even for law enforcement officers in that courtroom.
Well, that's right, Sandra. Even for, you know, the spectators, the viewers, the media, the people observing this, you can't help but feel the emotion and the sadness that these families are going through. Of course, I'm sure that we can't even imagine what they're dealing with, what they're going through, but the sadness is there, the heaviness is there, and the heartache for what we heard Mr. Dadian tell us, that you never actually get over this. You know, they talk about closure, but that really never actually comes.
No, the pain is there forever.
All right.
Lene, thanks very much. We'll see you in a little while.